When you venture out into recovery, whether it be for yourself, whether it be for your marriage, there will come a point where you have to begin to address the question of why the affair happened in the first place. It's vital, if you're an unfaithful spouse, to understand why the affair or the addiction happened. But if you're a betrayed spouse, I would say that it's equally vital for you to understand why the affair happened so that you can be able to heal and move forward in your own recovery. And we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But I will tell you, it becomes rather comedic when I'm talking to an unfaithful spouse and I start to kind of talk through, listen, we've got to help you understand why the affair or why the addiction happened in the first place. And they cut me off and go, well, I know why it happened. I know why it happened. And I'm almost always like struck with this feeling of, really? It's been a month or it's been a few months and you've not really done hardly any recovery work at all. Like you've read a couple journals or maybe you've even read a book or two, but it's been like 60 days and now you're this, master of recovery and I know why the affair happened. And I'm being a bit sarcastic, obviously, but I'm not trying to offend you. I just want to help you understand that your why for your affair at 6 months is going to be different than your why at maybe a year or 2 years. I would tell you that your why is going to be different at 5 years than it was at 2 or 3 years, and at 13 years or so, like mine, it's far different now than it was at 2, 3, or 5 years in. It changes. Rick will tell you, having it been somewhere in the neighborhood of 36 years or so from when he had an affair, he'll tell you that his why continues to change because he understands more and more, looking back, understanding the mindset, how dysfunctional we were when we had our affairs, understanding more and more about where our mind was, where our heart was, what we were doing, what we weren't doing. Your why is going to change, or at least hopefully your why is going to change and evolve over the years. Now let me kind of readdress that little critical, sarcastic moment, is that here's some of the reasons why I really find it difficult to believe that early on you know why you had an affair. Number one, you're not an expert. Number two, you have a very limited frame of reference because you are only judging your situation based upon your understanding and your perspective. You'll never be your spouse, you'll never be your kids, you'll never be the therapist that hopefully you'll get help with who are experts who've been through infidelity before, who have treated thousands of cases over multiple decades. And so for you to kind of, rush to assumption of, I know why I had an affair. And then typically I'll say, okay, well, why do you think you had an affair? Well, my spouse wasn't having enough sex with me and she was just unhappy, or he constantly, mommed or dadded me, or he always was disapproving. It was never enough. And, we were poor. We didn't have a lot of money. We were running on fumes and we were working too much. And all of those reasons I hear, I say, I don't know that that's the essence of why you had an affair, because hundreds and thousands and maybe even millions of people live under those circumstances and choose not to cheat. And I'm not trying to judge you or slam you or offend you, but I am trying to tell you that the reason that we think we cheat is not always the true reason that we have an affair. Quite often, it's our pride that gets in our way anyway. It's our pride that allowed us to have the affair or affairs and justify it time and time again. But then it becomes our pride again when we think that we can fix ourselves and we have all the tools, and if we'll just read a couple of books and if we'll just maybe kind of educate ourselves, then we're going to be able to fix ourselves. And I'm sorry, with infidelity and the trauma that occurs because of infidelity in the betrayed spouse, and the way that we damage ourselves as unfaithful spouses when we cheat. To think that we're going to be able to fix ourselves is like the surgeon that tries to operate on themselves. It very seldomly ever goes well. And so I really want to appeal to you to understand that if you think that you're going to fix yourself with your limited frame of reference of just your situation, you're even limited in the way that you see your spouse, because if you've been married longer than maybe a year, you have so much backstory. You have so much water underneath the bridge. If you think that you're going to be married for 15 or 20 years and be able to objectively see your spouse without seeing your spouse through the filter of unmet needs, unfulfilled expectations, rejection, insecurity, displeasure, it's just not possible. That's why it's so vital that you find a safe, expert place to get help to help you both see things objectively. You see, if you were to ask me at 1 year, Samuel, why do you think you had an affair? Somewhere in the 9 months to a year, I'd have said, well, Samantha wasn't really having a lot of sex. I was a hero everywhere outside the home. I was, kind of prideful and insecure, but we just had a lot of issues and having kids, and Samantha was extremely sick during the pregnancy, or all 3 pregnancies, and so it was really just hard. So there's not a lot of humility there. There's not a lot of ownership there. There's a lot of subtle blame and outright blame, right? I mean, that's kind of where I was about 9 months or so into recovery. Now, at 3 years into recovery, I would have told you that my why was, well, I was an applause addict and constantly needed affection and, approval from people. And I was overworking. I was, doing some things in terms of working late hours, and I was traveling all the time. Samantha and I were not very connected. Samantha did have some struggles that she was working through, but I cheated because I was unhealthy and I wasn't man enough or courageous enough to go get help and try and really bring about change. I wasn't willing to be the guy that laid down and humbled myself and said, we need to get help. So you can see at 3 years, there was a pretty significant shift, right? So now at 13 plus years, I would say to you, the reason I had an affair was I did not have the character to handle the success of what was going on around us. I was not in any shape or form aware of what my life was doing to Samantha. The chaos, the craziness, the traveling, the speaking, the working 5 nights a week, being gone 4 to 5 nights out of the week. Yeah, Samantha had some weaknesses and some vulnerabilities just in her understanding of marriage and intimacy and things like that. But at the end of the day, I cheated because I was unhealthy. I took the bait. I was not at any level mature enough or courageous enough to say no to the emulation and affection that was coming after me through success. And I will forever be guilty of not resisting. I will forever be guilty of allowing the vulnerabilities in my soul and the weaknesses in my life to stay hidden and not be confronted both by myself and the core intimate people in my life. I cheated because I was unhealthy. I wanted to get my needs met. It was absolutely selfish. It was absolutely birthed out of self-absorption, and I was completely clueless to the damage that I would bring upon Samantha and myself for years to come. So as you can see, my why changed. My hope is that your why changes. My hope is that you come to a greater understanding of why. If you don't come to a greater understanding of why, then quite frankly, you are incredibly ripe for relapse. Because if you don't know why the affair happened, how do you know how to prevent it from happening again? How do you establish a recovery protocol that is going to be in touch with the insecurities and the vulnerabilities of you and the insecurities and the vulnerabilities of your marriage? That doesn't mean that your spouse is the reason that you cheated. It means that there is no perfect marriage, and every marriage has vulnerabilities and insecurities that have to be addressed. Finally, I want to end with a very delicate approach to understanding why. You see, if you don't allow the light to be shined upon your situation, you're not going to be able to find out why the affair happened. And in many ways, you begin to then rob yourself of the immense amount of joy that will come out of the immense amount of healing that you see in your life. What I mean is, as you allow yourself to get help as an unfaithful spouse, as you allow yourself to have some very dark but very vulnerable conversations, you're going to begin to understand why the affair happened. As you are vulnerable as an unfaithful spouse, your betrayed spouse is going to be incredibly vulnerable as well, eventually. And when you both can be vulnerable, and when you both can allow the healing to take place, there will be so much joy, so much oneness, so much healing that begins to flow out of that moment, all because you understood that you didn't know why. You let go of the false assumptions. You let go of the pride that says, well, I know why I cheated. I don't need any expert help. I don't need anybody to fix me. I can fix myself, while everything crumbles between your hands. Take a lesson from my playbook. Humble yourself and get expert help so that you don't miss out on an incredible, life-changing experience of healing and redemption and restoration between both of you, because you allowed yourself to admit that you don't exactly know why you cheated, but you are willing to do whatever it takes to find out, because then you can begin to see the vulnerabilities in you healed, the vulnerabilities in your spouse healed, and the vulnerabilities and maybe the deficiencies in your marriage that didn't cause you to cheat, but are just there because you are two imperfect people. As you allow those deficiencies to be healed, you'll be amazed at what your life and marriage and family looks like.